today is the 5th of March, 2025, and I'm interviewing Mr. Andrew Ortiz. This interview is taking place in the Fine Arts Building on the campus of the University of Texas at Arlington. It is sponsored by the UTA Department of History and Geography and is part of the Voices Unscripted collection. Thank you for agreeing to be interviewed, sir.
Thank you for doing it.
Tell me about your early life and where you grew up.
Well, I grew up in a town in East LA, basically, and the town is called Pico Rivera, and it's right near Whittier. In fact, that's a lot of people think of that. I think that's where Reagan went to school.
Oh.
But anyway, I lived in Pico Rivera, and that's where I was born, and now I'm here.
What did your parents do for a living?
My father was a butcher. They both came. My mother and father came from Mexico, and my father joined the Navy in 40-something, and so we're here.
What are some of the first experiences that you remember as a child, particularly as it relates to art and photography?
Well, it's as far as strictly art and photography, I don't have anything that's straight on. The one thing I sort of mentioned the other day, where the one thing I remember about art was that in probably the 5th or 6th grade, I remember we had an assignment where we put little clouds, and I just remember the color of the orange cloud that we glued onto a piece of paper. It's the silliest thing to remember, but and then the other thing I remember, probably in the 5th or 6th grade, a little bit further, I took an art class, and the teacher really hated it, and what it was, I took a jar, probably about so big, and I turned it into a knight, like in shining armor. So I glued pieces of paper and then painted on it, and he really didn't like it at all, and so it made me stay after class and kind of redo it, and then I also he got me involved into the at the time it was he got me involved into a club that had to do with Latino and cultural events, and that's where I kind of started with learning how to be with other teachers and things that were outside of my usual realm.
Right.
And
so is that your first spark of artistic interest, is the around the 5th grade?
Yeah, I think so. It was my first kind of spark where I think I started being a little more not so afraid of everything.
Right.
And also it happened to be with girls that I wanted to be around, and I know it's silly, but it was. But basically, the teacher made it sound like I was figuring out what I was as a Latino artist.
I see. Did you have any siblings?
Exhibits?
Any siblings? Any brothers or sisters?
I have one brother who we were very different in our upbringing, and he was much more like a football player, and actually that's where I started photographing to begin with. He's 3 years younger than I am, but I went and photographed his football practice and the football games, and I was never really interested in anything, any kind of sports, but it was something that I could. I felt like all of a sudden photographing with what's called a rangefinder, Minolta. You had a Minolta rangefinder at the time. That does. A rangefinder is where you don't look through the lens. You're actually looking through a little glass box on the right-hand side.
And did you feel like then that kind of made you a part of other things that were going on around you?
I did. It did, especially especially it was where I didn't belong to really anything.
Yeah.
And earlier, I think I had a problem with learning English, and it's funny because when I was answering your questions, and that was one thing I really thought of. Mrs. Compton, who was, I was probably earlier 5th grade, brought me up in front of the class, and she said she held a little book, a little blue book, but it's so big, and she kind of pointed out to the class that this is the way you should be speaking English, and so I think from then on I tried to get my English a little bit better, and I didn't forget to bring my blue book to class.
Okay, it was an early experience that gave you some left some lasting impression, huh?
Yes, definitely. I guess it was because one, I think she was Anglo, and most of the class I think were Hispanics, and that's what. But I just remember her bringing me in front of the class, and I'd never really been in front of the class before.
I see. So it was a little embarrassing.
It was very embarrassing. Yes.
So other than the art teacher that you mentioned in 5th grade, were there any other teachers, or artists, or photographers, or family members that influenced you in your journey?
Well, there were two, as far as in my journey, you might say. My brother-in-law, who was he was studying architecture at USC, and I, for some reason, one evening he brought home a large piece of cardboard, and it had pictures of Winnie the Pooh characters, and I never really I wanted to do it, but my parents they wanted my brother-in-law to kind of make the drawing, so I felt really, to be honest, I felt kind of embarrassed about it. I did, because I wanted to do it, but they insisted on that he do the drawing, and then I kind of filled it in. It's almost like cartooning, and so it was just something that was at the time it was a little, for me it was embarrassing. It was a good start though.
So why did they want him to do it as opposed to you?
I think because he was an architect and he could draw. And so, whereas I was not, I didn't have those kind of skills.
How old do you think you were?
Probably maybe about 10.
Okay, so still very young, still not far from that 5th grade.
Exactly.
So
it
was
was
kind of a lot of things going on at that time.
I was growing up, and I still didn't have. I wasn't tested for epilepsy at the time, but that was to come.
Okay. So how did your cultural heritage influence you?
It was strange because I also that was one of the first questions that you asked, And to be honest, I was in the Boy Scouts a lot. My father was very adamant that both my brother and I join the Boy Scouts, and so I think because he liked camping, he liked fishing, and that was some of the things that I did a lot when I was with my dad, and it was strange because I thought of my cultural heritage as almost not really there at all, and I felt very embarrassed to be American. I remember in Boy Scouts we used to march in parades, and I was really upset because we'd march down the street, and I remember seeing the American flag. I did not feel American at all, so it was sort of it was something I felt I wasn't part of.
Why is that?
I think because most of the people were Hispanic. I felt very out of place. I did not feel. I felt more like people were looking at me and kind of. I mean, nobody booed or anything like that.
Right.
But I just felt like because I was Hispanic, I was more like somebody was studying me. And it wasn't, I mean, and nobody beat me up in class except for one kid who was younger than I was, and he ran faster than I did.
Okay.
And I think that was the only part.
But was that based on your race or your ethnicity, or was that?
No, it was smaller and could run faster.
That was just it.
Yeah.
So as you move forward, you mentioned the time when you were taking photographs of your brother's football games.
Yes.
And tell me about the first camera that you got.
Well, the one I used was my father's Minolta, but the first camera that I used to do art with was my brother-in-law's camera. And one evening, he was trading his. He had a Bronica, which was basically it's called it's a 2 1/4 image, and at the time, that's what he wanted to use. And he traded. We went to this man's house, and he traded his Bronica, and that's instead of a 35 millimeter negative, it was a 2 1/4 negative. And so he traded. He got a camera he wanted, and it was probably at the time, if I knew anything about photography, I would have shot with a 2 1/4. But he traded it for a Nikon and 35 millimeter. And at the time, and I was talking to another student about the other day, the cameras usually have nowadays a flip back, even the digital cameras. And this one, was made in 1972. I just know that because I was looking at it had a series of numbers in the back. And anyway, the camera back came out totally. And I know a lot of people think of it nowadays as being very strange. And now cameras are all video, and you record everything that way. But it was a very good camera, great lens, and I really loved it. It was something that I started out thinking myself as a possible professional, And and it was something that it made me feel important.
How old were you when
I got the
started
camera?
using that camera, when you got the camera?
I was probably 13, 14, maybe.
Okay.
It was, let's say it was just out of high school, maybe. And
Okay. And so, at this point, did you decide that photography was going to be your career, or when did that happen?
That happened when my senior year in high school, probably little 17. I tell a story sometimes to my beginning photo class. I got the camera at that time, but the way I thought I was going to be a photographer was he was showing images on during class. The class teacher's name was Vanderveer, and we called him Coach. And in class, he was showing a picture of by Paul Caponegro, and the picture that I was looking at, and I was sitting up close to the front to the screen, and was just a picture of it's a close up of a red apple, and but it looked like little stars, and I thought, wow, that's a beautiful picture of the universe. And I discovered afterwards it's not. It was a close-up. And from then on, I began to think it's not what it is, but what it can be.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So that happened as early as high school.
Yeah, it would happen in high school, yeah.
Wow. So that just kind of flipped the switch for you.
Yeah, definitely.
So where did you go from there? What happened after high school?
I was a very bad student in my first year of college, and I studied photography, took photo classes, but I was very bad at being. I would go to the library and flip at photo books, so I was skipping class. And then, in fact, I had to pay for a book that by a photo club in the library, and it was like $50. Back then, it was very expensive. But as far as you asked how it flipped the switch.
Yes.
And I think it was because I began to feel like this is something I could do.
So back to the apple for a minute.
Yes.
You said the photographer's name. What was the photographer's name?
Paul Caponegro.
Paul Caponegro.
Yes, that's right.
And moving forward into college, you said you weren't a great student, although you were doing your photography project.
That's true.
So what, in that first year, what happened?
Well, I took classes. I did have problems with my seizures, and for example, I had a good friend who, at the time, was a good friend, and later on in life, life happens.
Yes.
What happened was I had to drop out of school because one, he was graduating, my friend was graduating. I didn't have any money. My students, my parents didn't have really funds to keep me going to school, and so I came home. I decided I didn't want to be a teacher. And I went and I became a elementary, not elementary, but people who are teachers that work with kids
Okay.
at a very young age.
Okay.
And I thought I was a great teacher. The person that was involved with the program didn't like me so much, I think, because the kids really liked me. They would really come to me. We drew a giant gorilla on the wall, and the other teachers just, the other the head person gave me a very low profile.
Were you like a teacher's aide?
I was teacher's aide,
Okay.
yes.
And had you dropped out
I'd
of
never
college
done,
after your
I'd never
first
done
year?
anything like that before.
Right, and did you drop out of college after the first year? Is that
I dropped out of college after the third year.
after the third year? Okay.
Yes.
And what major were you pursuing? Was it photography?
Photography.
Okay.
It was.
And where were you going to school?
That was San Francisco State.
Okay. And what year was this?
What year? Probably 99,
Okay.
something like that.
Okay. And so after you dropped out of college, you got kind of you worked as a teacher's aide, you got
Yes.
kind of a low rating
Right.
review, I guess. So what did you do?
I worked, a friend of mine, he was working at Otis Parsons Art Institute. He got me a job as working in the darkroom. I already had some skills because of high school. And so I started doing, just working in the evenings, cleaning up the darkroom, making chemistry, but then I got back into my photography, and I was really happy with what my friend was doing, and he convinced me to go to Japan with him.
Oh.
And I was a model for him because we looked similar.
Okay.
And so he convinced me to get money from my parents to go to Japan for a couple of weeks, and I modeled for him a lot there and at home. And so it was, in fact, I finally convinced him to give me some of his photographs of me and just photographs that he had.
Yes.
And he was a very good printer. My first year teaching at UTA, I showed class of me nude, partially nude, and I was one of the students told their parents that they had photographs of me.
Oh my goodness.
And and then they called me back into the office. I showed them the work that I showed the students, and it wasn't really bad at all. It was very good. The whole purpose was to show them good printing,
Yes.
and
It was tastefully done.
excuse me.
It was tastefully done.
It was very tastefully done.
So backing up again, you mentioned your seizures.
Yes.
So these seizures were caused by what?
They never said anything. I can't tell you what they were. They're caused by. They don't know. I mean, to be honest, they really don't know. I mean, any neurologist you talk to, they just don't know. I mean, I take a lot of medication now, then the one neurologist even wrote a report on me. He didn't understand why the medication wasn't working.
Did they diagnose you with epilepsy?
Yes.
Okay. And how old were you when you received this diagnosis?
probably, it was early before going to college.
Okay.
So I was, 80, no, it was 8,000, I forget which one.
So, but in your late teens?
Yes, my late teens. In fact, I had worked, when I came came back from college, or not from going to college, I was working as a darkroom, but also I worked as in different theaters. And one was and I had to laugh because that's where I kind of met my wife. And I actually, that's not, I met my wife through my friend. But I had a job. I think you were asking about different kinds of work. And I worked at what's called Pussycat Theater. And back then, the guy told me that I didn't have a job because he thought I smoked marijuana.
Oh.
And so I called him back and I said I did not. And so, I was out. Back then, I was at that job. It was the first time I'd ever kind of, forced myself into a position. Somebody was calling me a liar, and he gave me the job. I went back, and and I didn't do anything more than what the high school students do now. You clean up, you sweep, you did things like that. And
you had mentioned though that you mentioned something about when your seizures started. When did they actually start? You received the diagnosis in your late teens.
Yes.
But when did you have your first seizure? Do you recall?
I'm sorry, I don't recall exactly, but I was about 15. Okay, and I had a grand mal seizure, and that's where have you ever saw the movie The Exorcist, where their head spins around?
Right.
That's what was happening to me. So, I didn't have any small seizures. Now I have just smaller seizures where I'll make a loud noise. I even tell my class from the very beginning, I'm not possessed. And later on, you may see this helmet, and I tell my students that I may make a loud noise.
Yes.
In fact, it happened the first year. This is 28 years ago. I told my students, don't worry about it. And I bent over and talked to the student, and I had a loud seizure. And it's almost like, it sounds like they're yelling, or I'm yelling at them, and I'm not. Some students, they thought I was joking. And from then on, I told students what, and that was in 2000, my first year here, and that was 97.
So when did you finish college?
Several years later. It took me about 8 years to be honest, because I had my first 4 years or 3 years at San Francisco State, and then I came home and I had several years at home working odd jobs, and I was even a ditch digger one time. And the guy I would talk to him about teaching, and he said, "Look, get out. You don't want to be here. So now you can. Why don't you?" I even worked 2 weeks at Burger King. It was terrible jobs, but so I went back to college. And
where did you go back?
I was ready to go back.
Where did you go?
I went back to San Francisco State.
Okay, back to San Francisco.
I went back there, and I really loved it. I paid attention to class, and I was in the photo area, and that's where I got a master's there, and then I got my MFA at SUNY in New York, and actually I was offered a full-time position in LSU, Louisiana State University, and but I turned them down and went to New York, and because they gave me a full scholarship, I had to work there in the darkroom, and that's where I was using my Nikon as well.
I see. Okay, I see. And so during this time, you're continuing to take photographs.
Yes.
What were you taking photographs of?
Let's see. Most of the time, I was doing a street photographer. And I think I mentioned we had a short conversation about Gary Winogrand.
Yes.
And it's funny because it's not really funny, but the man died, and I went to see his work. He had a large work at the Los Angeles County Museum there, and the man passed away, but he had barrels full of work that are film that was unprocessed.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean, this is just huge barrels, and they made like 10 foot by 12 foot photographs of just the film going across. And if you can imagine one photograph being just one little frame,
right.
He had thousands. And he was a very good street photographer. I mean, he could photograph, and he had this way of photographing people, but as they are, not just as they look like. You know, and that's one thing I really remember about him. It was beyond that when I told you about Paul Caponegro. But Paul, I mean, my high school teacher really showed me a lot of different types of photographing. And that was really important to me. And because you might have heard of Edward Weston, Ansel Adams, and all those guys were really important at the time. And so I looked up this, when I went back to graduate school, I looked up the director of the school. And that's why I switched. I was going to go to LSU. I said yes. And then I changed my mind when I found out the director of the school was good friends to people like that, good connections.
Right.
And I thought, okay, if later on I wanted to be a teacher, I wanted to be a photographer, and so all of that kind of switched. I switched schools. LSU was really pissed off, and it was a good change for me. I learned lots of things because, especially at the school in New York, and it was Rochester, New York, I learned lots of different ways of photographing. It wasn't just street photography, and though that's one of the first things I did was I photographed people, and we were talking earlier about photographing bums, I
say that in quotations, bums, right?
But that's true. And so I was photographing people,
Yes.
but and I can even show you some of the. I brought a case full of work that I did at the time, and anyway, that's
The street photography.
Yes.
You were kind of surreptitiously taking these photographs.
Yes.
You weren't. Did you actually walk up to people and say, "May I take your picture"?
There were most of the time I was photographing without people noticing,
I see.
and then there were times where I would photograph, for example, a shirt, and just that because people were selling shirts and they were hanging them on walls, and then I began to photograph like backyards, and I photographed people that were when I started going to Tijuana, and there I photographed just like tried to get I was looking at my own culture actually, and I began to think that I was Aztec, and I still think I still believe that, and I did some research and I looked at different Aztec cultures, and then I noticed that the Toltec were actually further north, which is closer to where my cousins and family live, so I began to think that maybe I'm more, and then I began to think you looked at you talked to Benito Huerta, and we both have the same nose, and I swear really I think we're both Toltec, and so or maybe even a little more Aztec. But if you look at a lot of Mexican people, they have this kind of nose. My nose is a little bent, and maybe that's when I was in Boy Scouts. People were looking at me as different. And there were some Anglo-Saxons, especially my best friend Donnie.
So in your studying your culture,
Yes.
as you perceived it,
Yes.
how did that change your approach to photography?
It didn't really change my approach to photography because it helped. It gave me an opportunity to go out and photograph, and like a lot of my photographs were very dark, very black. I photographed people who were. I asked them if I could photograph them. There was one point where I asked my wife. We had just gotten married, and I told my wife that I wanted to go to Mexico and photograph, and so I woke up, bought a plane ticket, and off I went to Mexico, and I spent 2 weeks there. And my wife thinks that she's crazy because she let me go off by myself, and I was having seizures at the time, and so she was sort of afraid that I might have problems, and that was when at the same time I had already been sending out work, and when I went there, she told me that I had gotten to my first show. I was very happy.
Oh, wow. So while you were in Mexico,
yes,
your wife had told you that you got your first show.
That's true.
And before we get to your first show, how did you meet your wife?
I met my wife when I was working my friend was working at Otis Parsons, and he set us up, and I met my wife because of we went to a Mexican restaurant, which is right around the corner from Otis Parsons, where he was working. And I thought I was just going to have lunch with him. Patricia also came with us because and she was there. And then so we sat down to have lunch, and Don, my friend, said, "Oh, I gotta go." And so Patricia and I, we were both kind of like, okay. and I was lucky, actually. She stayed with me because I asked her then at the time. I didn't really know that was going to happen, but I asked her out on a second date. Between that time and the second date, we went to a Dodger Stadium baseball game, and my friend suggested that I got kind of crazy, and she practically left me then. I'm not sure, but
what did acting crazy entail? How did that
oh, just like yeah, I'm going crazy like this, acting kind of really ridiculous. And
why did he suggest that?
Why did he suggest that? So that I would show a little more emotion, I think.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, because I was basically kind of a quiet.
Right,
type
kind of
person.
introverted.
Yes, I was introverted, yes. And so I had already asked her for a second date. I was a little more calm. I was by myself. Patty's friends had suggested to her, give him a second chance.
Oh, okay.
And so luckily we went to this concert, and so we just continued to date afterwards, and luckily after about 3 months, actually, I asked her to marry me.
Wow.
Yeah, we were on our way to a wedding, and I had a seizure while we were in the car.
Oh, goodness.
And I pushed the car. We're on the freeway, and I pushed the gear in from. I guess I think it was start to neutral, and she had to shift back into while we were driving on the freeway, and when by the time we got to the church, I didn't really know what happened, but I afterwards, after the ceremony, I don't remember whom was, but I asked her. I brought her back into the church and asked her then, will you marry me?
Was this the first time that she experienced your having a seizure?
No.
Okay.
She knew I had
So
it.
she
In
knew.
fact, there was one point she was in Japan with my brother-in-law at the time, and she came back. She found out I had a seizure, and she came back from Japan to make sure I was okay. And and my seizures have been kind of part of our lives together. And when I had my MFA in New York, she already knew that I had seizures, and by then we were married, and so it just been. She's been taking care of me, and I've been taking care of her. That's all.
So where did all that fit in the timeline? So you met her. How old were you? Where were you in?
Where was I? Oh,
Yeah,
you asked all the hard questions. Okay, let's see. I came here in 90. Let's let's see, I think it was, it's been 28 years from now, so back up. And that was, 2000, no, it was 97, so, and we had already been married 8 years before that.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, so there was a lot of time in between there. And so, yeah, that was 8 years, I'm sorry, we didn't have children until 8 years after we were married.
Okay. So you were how old when you got married? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember. To answer the question directly.
How many years have you been married?
We've been married 32 years. 32 years.
So where were you when you met, or where were you living?
I was living in Whittier, California.
Okay, so you were still in California. So she's a California girl too?
Yes.
Or not?
Yes, she's in California. She lived in Beverly Hills, close to Beverly Hills.
Okay. And so y'all met, 3 months later, you got married.
Yeah.
And after that was when you went to...
We'll have to fix all this date-wise with Patricia.
We'll go back
because you'll show her the notes and he's nuts.
That's right. That's not how it happened at all. So did she move with you to New York then?
Yes. Yes.
And so y'all lived together in New York.
Yes.
As you were getting your MFA.
Yes.
And then after you completed your MFA, what happened?
I got a job working here at UTA.
Straight from SUNY?
I never went. I got an MFA. Okay, and the woman who worked here at the time as chair saw that I had applied from She went to the same. She got an MFA from the same school.
Okay.
And I think they were hiring Hispanics at the time, and there were only two known that we knew of, so we all shifted over.
So you came here to Texas.
Yes.
And what was that experience like for you coming to?
Well, I've been moving around already.
Okay.
Because we went from, we were in New York, and we went back to California, and then we moved to Texas. So we were constantly moving around, we were living in Rochester for a while because I was getting my MFA, and
was it that big a culture shock for you coming to Texas?
No, it wasn't. There were already a lot of Hispanics here. I always kept to myself, and then even when I came here, I was asked to be a part of CIMAS, which is the kind of the Latino Cultural Center here, and I had a residency there, and which was nice, I would go there. I showed them a lot of work and what I was doing. They didn't really understand digital imaging or as a photographer, and so it was something new to them.
When did digital imagery come about, and how did that change?
When I was in, it came about when I was in getting my MFA.
Okay.
And I thought I was going to be a videographer. I went there to study photography. I did take photo classes, but I was doing some video work, and I went out and I photographed a lot, and I made a piece of work. It was called Mi Familia, Words Unspoken, Words Unheard. But that was all straight photos, and then put together as a kind of just slide images. And then in my MFA, when I graduated, I showed stills, and then it was really terrible stills because we had our scanner was a video camera, and so the texture on the images, a lot of people ask me that the texture, it looks just almost really bad. But it taught me how images could be put together, and because I was forced to learn a different way of looking at an image, and so I began to for example, put pieces with my father, and then there was parts where I made I forget. I'm sorry, but they're little, on a frame, okay, and these kind of arched backs you put into a frame, and I had a whole bunch of those, and I scanned them and I put them together with an image of my father. So, and not that the arching of the imagery look the same. Is if you look at the photograph itself, you can see the arch of these little objects, and the whole idea was me beginning to not just have one straight photograph of something. It began to be images that were meaningful, and other images that really didn't make any sense. It began to make sense to me.
So this kind of changed from a straight street photographer, or
Right.
a straight photographer, into more of an artistic, if you will,
Right.
focus.
Making photographs instead of taking photographs.
Making photographs instead of taking photographs. I think that's well stated.
Yeah.
And that began there in New York?
More or less, yes. But I was photographing at the same time, so it's not one or the other. It's I'm photographing. I photographed my father. I photographed pictures of my mother and father. Anything I could get my hands on. But also, I used my Nikon to go out and photograph.
And so you would take these images and bring them together into
Sure.
one single work.
Right, putting images together.
Yeah.
Right, and it's because it's a combination of both. It wasn't one or the other. And I began to be, because I kind of fell away from doing video, and plus the video, I needed the video to make single photographs. And then, so the video was more of a tool, and not so much something I was going for. It was straight photography, scanning with the video, and then I began to make not images that were, let's say, I'm not making a movie at all.
Right.
And
Right.
but I have kind of not. I have a great interest in video, and whenever there's an exhibition and somebody has a video, I'll take the time and to watch it because it was something that I was interested in.
So in this development of this new style for you, was there anyone who was doing something similar that influenced you, or did this just come out of your own mind?
Well, I saw work when we first went to there. I thought I kind of freaked out because they brought this artist in that he took parts away from a refrigerator, and this makes actually no sense. But if you were there, it did. And all of a sudden, it was a school of art.
Were there any other artists or photographers who influenced your work?
Let's see. There was, well, the one that did most was Gary Winogrand, like I mentioned before. The Nathan Lyons also, because he was a street photographer and he did a lot of, he photographed images in combination. And the one thing I do remember that I thought that I needed to pass on to students was one object in comparison to another object. It was, and I used to call it, my first year when I started working here, it was subject to subject. And a lot of teachers call it different terms. But I always thought that and if you look at any movie, if you look at any photograph, you'll see that's what it is. It's subject to subject. You even have movies where there's a person walking towards another person. It's you're comparing those two subjects, and I think that idea really influenced me quite a bit.
So how would you describe your style? Do you have a name for it?
Now?
Yes.
It's electroencephalograms. That's what I call it because that's what it is.
That's what you're basing it on. That's kind of the foundation of
Yes.
Of your work. How has that evolved over time?
Well, over time, it's changed because it's more of more abstract. Okay. It's much more abstract, and to me, it's more experimental. I look at a lot of painters, and I think that painting has given me a lot more examples to look at. I mean, I don't study photography as much as I do painting. Maybe because I'm looking at one subject compared to another subject. I mean, I even look at Beneath the Wetzel's work, and I see where my ideas have evolved over color and also over the subject to subject material, and because a lot of it is really strange. I mean, not his work is really strange. A lot of painters, and I think, would I call myself a painter now? No, I'm a photographer because a lot of my work is photographic, but I've begun to turn images like with each other.
So you mentioned Benito Huerta a couple
Yes.
of times. How did you get to know him, and how has he influenced you?
We both came here the first year. He was hired automatically. I was given. I was told I was going to be automatic, but when we got here, they go, well, we've got to do something else. We're going to see what you're going to make. You're a visiting artist the first year, and at the time I didn't know a lot about hiring or new jobs. I knew that it was difficult to get a job as a teacher, and so I said, "Fine, great, no problem. I'm with you." And I thought I did a pretty good. The first, when I had my interview, he brought me here and they sat me down and they said, "Well, what if this happens? What would you do?" And I kind of thought for a second, in the back of my head, I lied. But you can't put this
I guess
too
20
much.
years later, what are they going to do? Fire you?
Yeah, that's true. And 28 years later. Well, I didn't so much lie. I didn't portray it. You know, they thought I knew Photoshop.
Okay.
Right off the bat, and I didn't. I studied like hell before coming here, and so I knew quite a bit. But at the time, I needed a job. And I needed work. This is what I wanted to do, and I'm here.
You and Benito were hired though at the same time.
Same here, yeah.
And has there been any collaboration between the two of you, or has your work been totally separate?
Mostly totally separate. I would say I have printed for him, and he wanted. And just in his last exhibition, where he kind of his last hurrah, you might say, and I made a full-size print of him, and I've printed other things for him as well. There's another image in that series, and I printed things for his wife as well. And
I know he's collaborated with her.
Yes.
So how has his work then influenced you in particular? You mentioned one of the things you mentioned was color. What else?
The way I look at something now is the way that it doesn't have to be. And I go back to that same idea, changing, not necessarily working on something that it is. It's something that it can be. And so I go back to that apple.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So talk about the symbolism and the imagery in your work.
It's all about my brain. It's again, it is about all the seizures that I have. And it started out as a work series. It was called Measured Disorder, and so I was looking at how what was happening in my head, and because I was having a lot of seizures, and even when I came here, Measured Disorder, like it. You can even in the title, I was measuring what happened to me, and I thought that I have an image. It's called. It was one of the first three images actually I think I made, and I made a picture, just a glass jar, and I photographed it against light coming through the window. I used that, and I took numbers off of a scanner. In fact, so it was a number of different processes going through here, and the light was coming in, and then I took I think a piece of chicken, and I photographed it. So it's, again, process is going through and beginning to put it's like a puzzle, beginning to put pieces together. And in the background, so it's just this piece of chicken, which I thought my brain, and there were numbers in the background, and so again, I guess it's all about putting elements together.
I wanted to address that because you are not just taking photographs and essentially laying them on top of other photographs.
No.
You're using props in your work.
Yes.
Then you're creating images of those props, and then you're combining those things. So it's more than just laying one photo on top of another.
Oh, yes, that's true.
And when did that process really gel for you?
Think back. Okay, because I'm thinking back of when I think it began when after I got an MFA and I came here and my work was beginning to change, or I felt it needed to, so the first image I made was I took I had some images of I think a crow, and I multiplied them images. There were just 3 images across, and I was never happy with the image, but I felt like it was beginning to. And then the following year, I began to take images that were that's where that one image I just described about the glass jar,
Yes.
because it began to I needed to be outside, and I needed not just outside my body, but outside, meaning that images could be here, 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 and then come together. And that's what, that's how I began.
Why did you want to teach?
I wanted to teach because it was fun. And I wanted to teach because I felt I needed, I thought I was going to be a kindergarten teacher. I tried doing that when I had left school. I came back. I thought, I didn't know if I was smart enough, to be honest. And but I still had that idea. I wanted to teach. I felt like I could get along with people. I felt like, be that I had something to say, and especially in art school, you are thinking, okay, I'm good at this. Why can't I? And then when I came to school, it was a little difficult, because your first year of school, you think, everybody hates me, nobody loves me, that type of thing. And so, but I guess I have to tell a little story. It might not have to do anything with this. Is one thing that I thought kind of relaxed me was I told Bart was here also. I think he'd already been teaching here a couple of years. Bart was, yeah. And we were in the same building, and I guess we walked back and forth maybe at the same time, and just we liked the Cowboys, or I did, and so we had that in common. But I was kind of the jinxter, or somebody I could play jokes, and so he was in the classroom. He was about to start his class. I told him, Bart, I'm sorry. I've been asked to tell you that you're fired. And he looked at me, like, really? So I was so mean. I mean, and that was. I just like telling jokes, and it was just something that, and I just started to laugh, and so from then on, he's constantly. For 28 years, he's tried to one up me, and it's never worked.
It didn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work, and so I always tell him, like, sorry, Bart. He was, when I walked by him, he says, "Are you still here? Haven't they fired you?" And that's so.
So, expand on that a little bit. Your experience as an educator. There's the camaraderie within the community.
Yes.
As an educator and coming to a university fine arts program.
Yes.
Have you seen more collaboration amongst the different disciplines, more camaraderie, and more your influencing others' work, etc.?
I think so. I think maybe with me, I studied what other people were doing, like painters, like Marilyn Jolly's work, Benito's work especially. I think maybe because we were just close friends at the time. We were both Hispanic, and often we've gone over to his house and just, at different times. But I was always interested in other people's work, and like Justin, who's the glass person. Though I'm not a glass person, what I really loved about his work is he made a video one time, and there was this thing spinning in the ground, and it was projected onto the floor. But what I really liked was that I could do something outside of what you normally would do, as outside, just taking a photograph, for example. And then with Benito's work, there was, it was easy for him to be, let's say, take images all of a sudden, like he had a dream one time, and that's where that skull,
Yes.
and I could see where, I thought the work was different in Benito. You didn't hear me. But then again, I began to see other elements where he's put images together, and I really liked that. I was really drawn to that, and where he's taken work and that and maybe in just in an image where they're all yellow background, and this one something he did just normally or recently, and there's these objects. I think it's a knife and something else that were opposite each other.
A knife and a gun?
Yeah, and so what I liked about his work was that it was work that could be compared
Yes.
to each other.
It goes back to that same thing that you were saying earlier about comparing two images, which is
Subject to subject.
Yeah, subject to subject.
Yeah.
How have you seen the local art community evolve since you've been here?
The local?
Yes.
Okay. I have not seen much of it, to be honest. I did have images. I've had exhibitions at the Museum of Modern Art, or Museum of Art here, rather. I wish the Modern Art, though I haven't seen a lot of it. There are a couple of exhibitions that I saw at the Modern Art, and there was he did a lot of I forget his name. He was an African painter, white person, and it was just a beautiful work that he did. He did video. He did, and there were these ants he took, and that were on each side, and giant videos that he did. And then he did smaller videos where they were just like puppets. But there were just, again, I think it's that idea of being drawn outside of your head, you know, and that's what I really liked.
Talk about your most significant work and what those works mean to you.
Two works. One was, and I have a picture of it here, and it was when I was doing my studies of me being Toltec or Aztec, and so I was looking for a culture, looking for a land to be, but I made this image called Nuestra Señora de Maíz, Our Lady of the Corn, and I put myself down at the bottom, but later on in different versions I took that out because I wanted to simplify the image. The image has lots of different corn leaves or corn husks, you might say, and then there's a picture of Our Lady of the Corn, which actually it's the Saint Mary, okay, and in one case it's actually it's Mary, but as like Our Lady of Guadalupe, which is more African and black, but the Mexicans adopted her, and that, I think in that image it's the same saint. I don't consider myself religious at all, but that image, it was something that I remember my mother was pissed at Our Lady of Guadalupe because the saint had not cured my epilepsy. And so she was really upset.
Yes.
And she was very religious,
Yes.
very religious. But, and this is several years before my mother died. And my mother died a few years ago. But she lived to be 93, you know, so it was it's not like she didn't have a full
But is
life.
that why that image is so
No,
important?
I
to
made that
you?
in before.
Oh, you did?
No. It was one of the first images that was very digital, you might say, and maybe later on, I'm going to cut to it. It's probably that image and the one that's hanging outside with the bird, because I could say that image belonged in a certain spot, and if you look at the crows actually happened when I was getting an MFA. But to finish your question, which images are my favorite, and I think it's those two. And the crow, I would put back and forth, and in a different spot. And I guess it always goes back to subject, and it was just this crow with and I sewed it together. I took a picture of so this is photographing with my Nikon, and actually by then I think I already had well, it doesn't matter, a different camera. But it was I have that image of the crow, and you asked me about it. Why is it so close to one edge?
Right. The crow is facing the short end of the picture, which is.
Yeah, it's normally, you might think that, okay, just put things right in the middle, and that's it. And that's not what I wanted to do. It had to be a specific reason. And that cloud that's on the head is very, it's important to me because it's talking about what's going on in my head and what does that crow mean? The crow is me, and that the cloud that's inside my head is that picture.
So that more represents you.
Yes.
The Lady of the Corn. That
one was. It's not a picture. Well, it had a picture of me. I removed it. But the Virgin Mary in that picture, I think it has to do with my religious upbringing, and that's when I was very young. Because we went to catechism. My father would drop us off. He never got into religion, and that might be with lots of kids, but it's just something I remember.
Yes.
And always going to that church. The church it's called St. Francis of Assisi, and not that I'm a religious person at all. It's just something that is important to me, and it's not like I wanted to give that up either. I want to be Toltec. I want to be Aztec. I don't want to rip up my heart, but it is something that like it's not that I wanted to do something with Benito, or because he's more, let's say, cultural than I am. I just think that at the time, it was something that I had to remember. you know.
That makes sense. Have you worked on any commission projects?
I mean, somebody paid me for it.
Yes.
Yes, I have, but not directly. I sent my work to it's called sorry, it's an organization in not Los Angeles, but it's in Newport Beach, okay, in California, and I got into this, and she had, at the time they called the organization Hidden Truths, because it was all about people with epilepsy sending in their work, and you can probably find it online as well, so I got into the show, and then a couple of times I started that in 2011, so it's been a while, and so year to year, and then one year somebody bought an image. I was sort of surprised, and then because the images were a little bit different than, it's not a picture of a flower or and so it was very different, and then one woman saw the work and she wanted a copy, and so I made 2 copies of an image. It was very different, and if you saw the image, you would say, "No way! I've got a copy of it here." And it's a picture of sort of a skull, and then it's got an EEG line going across, and then on top of that, I made a line where I think what I'm doing is thinking, and that's what it looks like.
So, how many exhibitions do you think have been done of your work? Do you have any idea?
60, 70.
Wow. Anyone that stands out? I know the first one when you were in Mexico, I guess that was pretty important, but...
Well, yeah, I never saw the exhibition.
Oh, really?
No, never saw that. I just saw, they did send me a book, a leaflet, but I never saw that. I was in Mexico, and I had already sent them when I got back, I sent them the work, but I was accepted to the exhibition.
Were there any exhibitions of your work that stood out as being more significant or more important to you personally than any other?
But that image was because it belonged to somebody else's, and it was a museum across the country, and that was really important to me.
With
the whole idea of the exhibition was they took images that represented her idea in the book that she wrote, and she you've probably seen the work by Sandra Cisneros, and almost every child has read that book nowadays, and it's all about Mexican culture, and Sandra Cisneros, and she's written several books.
That's a collaboration it's kind of an unintentional collaboration,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's the one you're most proud of.
I think I'm most proud of it because other people have seen it, and it's something that I think it means other people appreciate it.
How do you prepare for an exhibition yourself, and what do you hope that people take away from your work?
Well, for example, recently, last year, I had an exhibition at, or actually I was part of somebody else's exhibition. And Carlos has done one, which I think you should make he's also as a painter here and teaches over at the SAC. Carlos did one, and his exhibition was at Kirk Hopper, and that's you may have heard of it. But I was part of it. He asked me to be part of the back hallway, and somebody came up to me and they were looking at my work, and they asked me if it was mine. And I had two images that were had EEG. It was from the I can't say it. Electroencephalogram. Yeah.
I wasn't sure that I could say it either. That's why I haven't brought it up again.
Yeah. Electroencephalogram.
Yeah.
I just call it EEG. It's a lot easier.
Right.
But anyway, she, her kids, or she worked at a camp where they had EEGs for the kids, but she recognized what it was.
Oh.
And so a lot of people don't, and it's understandable. Because I mean, you might think that it's EKG and it's not.
Right.
It's EEG, right. And it measures what's happening in your brain.
Right, brain activity as opposed to cardiac activity.
Exactly. Yeah.
And she recognized.
She recognized
what it was.
What it was. Yes, it was.
That's interesting. How did that make you feel when somebody?
Oh, it was wonderful.
Yeah, somebody actually understands.
Yeah, somebody understands the work. Somebody understands what. Why it's there, and it's not, it's a small part of the image. You can barely even see it, but it's when somebody's studying your image, then you begin to feel, hey, that's meaningful to me.
Right.
When other people, I've sent work, that were in the past few years. I did a portrait, and I blurred my face so much so that you could barely see it. You had to look really close and say, "Oh yeah," Now I understand. I can see it, and not that I was hiding myself, but it was a portrait of me inside of a jar, and it's sort of like that one you saw upstairs of me in a jar that was enclosed. Yes. But this time the image was very hidden. And I thought that was an important image, and then that was one of my first images. And I thought that was, along with the EEG, when people see that image was more about my, the one where my face is hidden. It was part of my measure disorder. Okay, and it was because it was part of me that was there but not there.
As a teacher, what advice do you have for students? You're not too far away from retiring right now.
Right.
What advice do you have for students and aspiring artists?
Don't give up, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. That would be that would be my strongest advice. That it's nothing's wrong, and don't give up.
What do you hope your legacy is going to be?
My legacy.
As an artist, as a man, as a Hispanic man, as an artist?
I would like all those, but I would hope that people recognize my work as something new, and also something that is important. That it, even though it's different from just straight photography, because some people call my image, I'll be carrying my images, oh, that's a nice painting. Not a painting. And so it's like, hey, that's cool, you know.
How do you want to be remembered?
How do I want to be remembered? I want to be remembered. The first thing that came to mind was as a good father. That's what I want.
How many children do you have?
I have one child. He's 28, going to be 28 in May. He went to school in back east at Lafayette College, and he's working for a company called Raw, and he's not making tires. He's fixing computers, and so I'm awfully proud of him, and begin to cry. Okay.
I didn't intentionally do that.
I know. You can leave it in if you want. I don't mind. But I had to go back and answer your question and say how do I want them to be? What I want to be remembered the best? I mean, at first I thought, oh, my artwork, and that's not what I really wanted. In the end, I want to be remembered through him. I want him to, because he right now he's studying to be a musician, and I gave him a guitar, and I told him, if you want, I'll get lessons for you. And for a year, he got lessons from a student that lived here, and now he's on his own, and young man. Yes.
When I ask you, what do you want your legacy to be, or how do you want to be remembered, it didn't have anything to do with your being a photographer or an artist or a man or a Hispanic man. You want to be remembered as a good father.
Mm-hmm.
That's significant.
I think so. Everything else I've done, I got married and I had a beautiful wife, but I think getting married and having, making making something that was, important, and that was my son, through my wife, obviously.
Of course.
And as far as, but if we want to go back and not necessarily change it, but see what somebody else is thinking about about my artwork, that it's difficult, and that it is it's different, you know, and it's that it's not Ansel Adams, but it is definitely great.
So what does retirement look like for you? What are you going to do?
Not soon enough.
So it's welcome.
Yeah, definitely.
But what are you going to do in retirement?
I'm going to make as many pictures as I possibly can before I say goodbye to the world. My wife keeps saying that, oh, you got to clean the backyard, you got to mow the lawn. But actually, you probably see me around campus a lot more. I'm trying to get emeritus right now so I can be on campus.
Right.
And because I can't afford to print the way they do here.
Yes. Yeah. It's not an inexpensive process.
No.
Do you have anything that you would like to add to this conversation that we haven't discussed?
Just don't give up. You know, if I'm talking to other kids, you know, if somebody tells you did it wrong, you know, ask why. You know, always ask why. And that's you know, as a photography teacher, we always tell students, you know, when they're writing out proposals, you know, how, what, where, and why. And I add influences. And so don't, you know, if I'm talking to a student, don't give up. You know, I screwed up. I screwed up too many times, and I came back. You know, it took 8 years to get my MFA, but I was an older student when I went.
Right.
And I loved it. You know, people looked at me and were impressed. You know.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and
Thank you for asking me. I'm happy to do it.
It's been my pleasure.